12 News is your local election headquarters. Now we continue our Where They Stand series on WPRI.com. I'm Ray Bakari. Joining us today is Kelsey Coletta, who is the Democratic nominee for Rhode Island House District 42. This district contains parts of Johnston and parts of Cranston. No matter who wins this election this November, there will be a new state representative in this district because Kelsey had unseated the current state rep, Edward Cardillo Jr., in the September primary on the Democratic side. Kelsey, it's good to have you here.
Thanks for having me.
So in 60 seconds or less, why do you want to be the next state rep for House 42?
So I was raised in a home that put a lot of emphasis on advocacy and community involvement. I've been involved in politics in one way or another since I was about 14 years old. Over the years, I have spent a ton of time at the State House. I've had the opportunity to help draft legislation, work really closely with legislators to help get meaningful bills passed. And as a social worker, I see the gaps in the system every single day, and there are solutions for them. Ultimately, I really love my community, and this is the best way I can think of to give back.
And if you're elected, one of the biggest items that every legislator votes on, it's usually toward the end of the session, right before the summer break, is the state's budget. We're now at the point where every federal dollar possible from the American Rescue Plan Act has been spent. You get the Washington Bridge coming up, so there's the rebuilding of it, so there's going to be a lot of money spent on that. And just there's a projected deficit too. So looking ahead, what are some things that you would want to stay in a budget? You know, understand that there's probably going to be some cuts, and maybe like what are some things that you think would be cut?
One of the things that's really important to me is Medicaid and Medicare reimbursement rates. I work in a field that's rapidly losing providers because people can't afford to stay in that field. When I think of the budget, I don't think of it as numbers. I think of it as people and lives. It's our children and their education. It's our seniors. It's our small businesses. It's state retirees. Ultimately, my goal would be to put as much money back into taxpayers' pockets as possible and to make their tax dollars work for them.
Got it. And then education is also another big issue aside from the state's fiscal picture. There's a lot of ways you can approach this, whether we look at higher education, the funding formula. What would be one educational reform that you would champion as a legislator if you're elected in November?
So I am the daughter of a public school teacher and product of public schools. Funding public education is really, really important to me. Our schools across the state are underfunded and in serious disrepair. Cranston is an excellent example of that. In Johnston, just this year, 12% of their staff was laid off. It's one of the lowest paid, if not the lowest paid, school districts in the state. So funding public education is really, really important to me. That's something that I would focus on until it is done.
And a quick follow-up on education before I move on to the next topic. Johnston, where most of this district is located, is one of actually the only city or town in the state that's not signed on to the Learn 365 program, which for those watching, it's this grant money that the state gives to cities and towns to help expand education outside of the classroom, sometimes usually like after-school programs. Is that something you think Johnston should sign on to and join the other cities and towns?
I think the more resources we have available to our children, the better.
And sticking with the Johnston-centric one, and this is one that I remember when we talked when you first ran, Floodwater Infrastructure. It's, Johnston alongside Cranston, since that's part of the district too, has seen some gnarly floods over the last couple of years. So as state rep, how would you help improve the floodwater infrastructure?
So we were really lucky. I mean, the mayor's done a lot of really hard work getting us federal funding. We got $48.5 million to help with the flooding. There's money at the state. We just need somebody who will go and advocate for us. The flooding is not just something that makes your morning commute a little bit more stressful or annoying. It's life-threatening. I mean, we've seen the pictures and the video of people being carried out of their homes or rescued by boat in plazas that contain small businesses. And when the plaza is closed, they're not only losing out on money, but their property is at risk of being destroyed. So getting enough money to address the flooding is something that's priority for me.
And one final question I have, on the same ballot that your race is going to be on, Rhode Islanders will also be tasked with a question, and the question is asking if Rhode Island should have a constitutional convention. We get this question once every 10 years, typically the year that ends with the number 4. A lot of people have strong views about it. Some people don't even understand what the concept of a convention is. We'll be having interviews with folks for and against that to explain more about that concept, what the convention is. But in your opinion, is this something that Rhode Island should do or reject?
I am not in favor of a constitutional convention for a few reasons. I know last time was 1986. There were a lot of really concerning amendments that were approved, things that were very, very anti-choice, put reproductive rights at risk, disenfranchised a lot of people with a criminal record. Financially, that's another big concern for me. I know the estimate is would cost the state $5 million, which is money that we could have on go towards other things. And also, there are no restrictions on what can be spent, which means that out-of-state special interest groups can throw a lot of money, and it's often sold as a way to have voters be heard. But when there are people from out of state throwing a ton of money to have their views represented and have their ideas pushed through, then voters don't have a voice. But ultimately, our Constitution is not for sale. So I do not support a constitutional convention.
That's all the questions I had. Kelsey, I want to thank you so much for giving us your time for this.
Thank you very much.
And thank you for tuning into this edition of Where They Stand. Remember, 12 News is your local election headquarters. We have other candidate interviews as well as a voter guide available on WPRI.com. For now, Ray Bakari, 12 News.